In the Torah reading, if you were paying attention, I'm not going to take a quiz who was paying attention or not, but it says, Vateshev mineged, vatisa et kola vatevk. Hagar sat at a distance. She lifted up her voice and she cried. And the text says that God listened to the cry of the boy, but the tradition, of course, understands that Hagar's cry is heard, that God responds to her. There's an incredible midrash in Bereshit Rabbah that has Melech David, King David of all people, pleading to God for his prayers to be accepted. And he says, please accept my prayers just like you accepted Hagar's. Based on the psalm, Nod safarta ata sima dimati, bino adecha halo besifratecha. You have taken account of my wandering, put my tears in your flask. King David said, accept my tears like that woman Hagar with the flask. God is imagined as the one collecting the tears of those who cry out, taking notice of all the pain and sorrow, all the uncertainty and fragility. And King David too wants to be heard, for he too feels at a distance, just like a stranger. Hagar, which means the stranger. He's a stranger like Hagar because he has made so many mistakes. But God isn't only collecting tears, as expressed in this midrash based on the Psalms. There is another midrash where God asks the angels, what does a king of flesh and blood do when he mourns? And the angels replies, he sits and cries. Kach ani oseh, says God, then I shall do so as well. God cries too. So many tears for this broken world that was conceived on this very day, on Rosh Hashanah. Hayom harat olam. Today is the day the world was conceived. Actually, officially, it's the day that human beings were conceived. And according to the Midrash, when God was envisioning the creation of the human being, there was an argument, you've probably heard this one before, amongst the angels, whether human beings should be created. Kindness said, let them not be created. Let them be created as they perform acts of kindness. Truth, Emet, said, let them not be created because they are full of lies. Righteousness said, let them be created as they perform acts of righteousness. And peace said, let them not be created as they are all full of discord. What did the Holy Blessed One do? God took truth and cast it down to the earth. God took a risk on us and created us. Happy birthday. There aren't enough flasks to hold the tears of the world we are living in. No matter where we come from, no matter our politics, left or right or center, or our allegiances, even those of us who I consider myself as one who, as Abraham Joshua Heschel says, are optimists despite our better judgment. It's a heavy lift, this world we're living in. We arrive, at least I think I arrive on this Rosh Hashanah, grieving for our world. Eicha, how could it be that nearly 2 years after the heinous and vile acts of October 7th, with 1,200 murdered, there are 48 hostages still in the tunnels or in the city of Gaza, less than half of them alive? Eicha, how can it be that the war has raged on for 717 days? At least 910 Israeli soldiers have been killed. and Gaza lays in ruins, 70% destroyed. Over 65,000 Palestinians dead. I don't want to argue about the numbers. So many are children. Starvation, endless destruction, exhaustion, no end in sight, and no clear goal. Eicha, how could it be that the dream of Zionism has turned into the goal of being super Sparta? Eicha, how can it be that 78% of Jewish students on campuses, as the latest statistics go, are hiding their Jewish identity? That 70% of the religious hate crimes in the US target Jews. Eicha, how can it be that in 2025, anti-Semitism is on the rise? Jews have been murdered outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in DC, at a hostage rally in Boulder, and the governor of Pennsylvania had his house firebombed on Pesach. This horrifying reality has been accompanied by a weaponization of anti-Semitism for the purposes of suppressing free speech and pulling essential funding for research, for cancer, among so many other things, from universities and hospitals. Eicha, how can it be that we have lost the art of compromise and now live in a country where toxic polarization and cancel culture has morphed into the use of gun and assassinations to solve our problems? Eicha, how can it be that our melting pot nation, a supposed country of law, has failed time and time again to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and now has masked agents disappearing people off of streets, arresting people when they arrive for their immigration hearings in our own city and many others, and criminalizing people in Los Angeles because of their race or ethnicity? Eicha, how can it be that liberal democracies around the world seem on the verge of collapse and authoritarian regimes are becoming the norm? Seems to be that way in our own country. And what to say about our Jewish people? Eicha, how do we understand what it means to be a Jewish people anymore? With so much internal strife about the relationship with Israel across the political spectrum, or the generational divide, or even here in our own community. And what does it mean for us that there is often no distinction between Jews and the Israeli government, and therefore we are exposed in our universities, in our election right here in our very own city, in our nation, and on the international stage? Eicha, how can it be that Jewish life has become so filled with fear that we are afraid to even ask questions of morality and ethics and look at ourselves in the mirror? How can it be that the language of Torah is being obscured and abused so profoundly in order to dehumanize others? How can it be that we might not have room in our hearts for another's pain, whether it is another Jew, a Palestinian, or someone who is, quote, on the other side? Is this what our tradition and our religious life has become? And each of us are carrying our own eicha, our own hurts and pains, illnesses, job loss, food insecurity, loneliness, and vulnerability. We, like Hagar, are wanderers, putting our tears in God's flask. We, like Melech David, like King David, are praying that our cries will be heard. And we, like God, are grieving, crying for this world of ours. We can be in it together, that's for sure, in our sorrow, in our fear, in our prayers, in our tears, for all that is and for all that isn't. I think all of us are wondering about the nature of the world we are living in, a world in profound rupture. There is a collapse of fundamental structures and assumptions that once provided us with stability and meaning, and it is not clear how we find our way out. We are truly at a crossroads. Our tradition has language for this idea, and it's strong language, but this is the orientation I think that we feel we need to have, which is Chorban, destruction. Chorban is not merely the destruction of the first and second temples. Chorban is the idea of a sense of profound dislocation, of losing our center, of how we make sense of the world. It is filled with so many emotions, grief and loss, anger and despair. But the tradition did not use this category merely to describe a moment in history or a handful of moments in history. The rabbis, in some ways, had a field day with the idea. They unpacked its meaning, and they constructed responses in the void of how to figure out how to live in the chaos, in the destruction. Of course, the first and very natural response to despair in the midst of destruction is to say, nothing matters, and there is no meaning and no way out. We throw up our hands and give up and withdraw. And that was certainly one response to the destruction of the temple. The sages taught in the Talmud in Ta'anit, when the temple was destroyed for the first time, many groups of young priests gathered together with the temple keys in their hands, and they ascended to the roof of the sanctuary and said before God, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, since we did not merit to be faithful treasurers and the temple is being destroyed, let the temple keys be handed to you. And they threw them upward, and a kind of palm of a hand emerged and received the keys from them. In the midst of their own failures and catastrophic destruction, the priests literally threw the keys back to God and said, this isn't for us anymore. We're done. It's a stunning image. Another response to the destruction was to remain stuck in the past. Once, as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was walking out of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yehoshua followed him. Seeing the temple in ruins, he cried, Oy lanu, woe to us that this place is in ruins, the place where atonement was made for Israel's sins. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Bani, my son, do not grieve, for we have another means of atonement which is no less effective. What is it? Gimilut chasadim, deeds of loving kindness, about which Scripture says in Hosea, I desire loving kindness and not sacrifice. Rabbi Yehoshua can only see the world through what was, the paradigm of temple worship. He's not only mourning, he can't imagine that there's any other way to relate to God or to be granted forgiveness. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has another approach. He assures Rabbi Yehoshua, there's another way to do this. This is the same Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai who knows the story? Smuggled out of Yerushalayim, right, in a coffin to negotiate with Vespasian while the city of Yerushalayim was up in flames. He famously said, give me Yavna and its sages. Essentially, give us a place to go out of this destroyed city, and we will build anew. In the telling of this story in the Talmud in Gittin, Rabbi Yosef, and even some say Rabbi Akiva, criticized Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai for not asking for Jerusalem to be saved. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew that they couldn't last as the way it was. He knew something needed to change. And so he midwifed the fragile transition from the sacrificial cult to rabbinic Judaism, which is really the Judaism that we live today. Through Torah and halakha, deeds of loving kindness and prayer, the rabbis reimagined our relationship with God. They transitioned from a temple-centered Judaism to a text-centered Judaism and a lasting legacy of ongoing interpretation. On the very grounds of destruction, the rabbis had the faith and the trust that something new could and would emerge. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told Rabbi Yehoshua that acts of loving kindness could replace the sacrifices for atonement, Jerusalem was still burning. It's not like they had built the rabbinic period already. He used a quote from the Bible to say, deeds of loving kindness will replace the sacrifices. It's not like that whole system had been built. But he used his intuition to construct an answer in the void. He hadn't built a full answer of what would come next, but he believed that in community with the sages in Yavna, that they had the raw materials to start again. But the rabbis didn't only reimagine what the service of God could look like, they also did a moral reckoning. They asked, what was there to learn from this moment of destruction? In the Talmud, in Shabbat, the rabbis come up with a litany of reasons why the temple was destroyed. Injustice, hatred, corruption, moral weakness, lack of generosity, sinat chinam, right? Baseless hatred, murder. They talk about the desecration of Shabbat, going beyond the letter of the law. All of which spoke to the erosion of the soul of the Jewish people themselves. They didn't derive this list in order to blame the victim. And to be clear, theologically, we don't believe illness or personal tragedy is God's punishment. But they created this list, this introspection, to make an invitation, an examination of themselves and the society in which they lived, in order to ascribe spiritual and moral meaning to what befell them in order to build again. In taking this approach, the rabbis don't say, we have no part to play. They gave themselves agency, they looked themselves in the mirror, and they took responsibility for what was and what could be. In our tears and our fears and our rage and despair, in this moment of profound unrest and dislocation, it is natural to throw up our hands and say nothing is possible anymore. You don't have to just pick up the paper every morning to feel that way. We may want to sit in our existential despair, but it can border on nihilism, and that is not an answer, says our tradition. We need to give space to the void, but we cannot stay there. And Rabbi Yehoshua lives in all of us. We have a desire to have what was and to hold on to an old paradigm so tightly that we can't move forward. So much of what we believed has fallen apart in front of our eyes. We took so much for granted. Many of us believe that the arc of the moral universe was bending toward justice, that American democracy was continually moving toward building that perfect union. We believe that our safety here as Jews was assured and that we were fully accepted in American society. Many believed that the birth of the Jewish state, that we as Jews would finally be masters of our own fate, and we would build a nation on freedom and justice and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel, so powerfully described in Israel's Declaration of Independence. The massacre of October 7th shattered so much of our sense of safety and our belief in the possibility of peace. But with the ongoing war in Gaza and the West Bank moving closer and closer to annexation, day by day, literally as we speak, and the over 50-year occupation, we are not only masters of our own fate, but we are masters of the Palestinians. The idea of being a light unto the nations and belief in our moral exceptionalism is challenged, if not over. These beliefs were comforting, even sacred in their own way, but they were illusions, now broken, and they must be acknowledged and released. But we can't stay there either. Yamim Noraim is a true gift. Give me 10 days to sit in a sanctuary and I'll take it. To not only ask the question, Echa, how could it be? But to ask the questions, Mi ani, Mi anachnu. Who will I be in this? Who will we be in this? It is because of the imagination and creativity of those like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that we are actually sitting here today. If he hadn't left and discussed that negotiation with Vespasian and gone to Yavna, we would not be here doing what we are today. Yes, the world is in a very dark place. And yes, those angels were right. We lie, we make mistakes, we have discord, we are fallible. But amidst the rubble of our own lives and the world and the uncertainty that lies ahead, we are not chained to the existence of what is. Unlike the priest who threw the keys back to God, we must keep the keys to open the gates of tshuva, open the gates of transformation. Yamim Noraim is an incubator for the imagination. Joanne and I didn't speak about the word imagination before she gave her drash. It is a cocoon to sit in the grief and uncertainty and to reimagine. Today and for the coming days, we can take a hard look at our lives and our Jewish community and the world and cry over what is not working and fill God's flask with all the tears we shed and pray that we are heard. Hayom Harat Olam. This is the day on which humanity was conceived in all its messiness. But the midrash about how we conceived doesn't end there. Doesn't end with God throwing the truth into the ground. It continues. The ministering angel said to the Holy One, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, why do you humiliate your seal? Lift truth up from the earth. But the midrash doesn't end there. It continues. It's almost interrupted because it doesn't actually continue in order. It then says, the rabbi said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Me'od Adam. Adam, the human being, is very. As it is written, Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa, v'hine tov me'od. And God saw that everything that God had made, and behold, it was very good. Behold, the human is very good. And then the midrash continues. Rabbi Huna, the elder of Sipori, said, while the ministering angels were debating each other and conferring with each other, the Holy One created the human and said to them, what are you debating? The human is already made. Yes, It seems we humans have been around for 5,786 years, give or take a few. It is we who will rescue and lift up the truth from the earth. Only we can do that. In the storm and the upheaval of this world we are living, our tradition invites us into these most precious hours and awesome days of prayer and tears, of song and silence, to sit in the incredible discomfort and uncertainty of our existence. We have the greatest privilege of pausing to look at ourselves and look at our people, to look in the mirror, to tell the truth, to raise it up from the ground, to own up to our own failures, and to recapture our agency in this very broken world. We can dream and imagine again. Ashreinu ma tov chalkenu, uma na'im goralenu, uma yafa yerushatenu. How fortunate we are for this time together. How good is our portion to do this work. How beautiful is it to dream. How extraordinary to have a heritage that upon destruction reimagines again and again and again and again, from destruction to dreams over and over again. We were meant for this. We were given the tools for this. Our stories tell us so, both in history and in the text, to sell us, to affirm for us that we are tov me'od, we are very good. We are stamped with God's image. And though out there the world does not feel very good, maybe, if we start from that very belief that we are me'od tov, that we are very good, and that we can dream again. Like Yochanan ben Zakkai, we can find another way and use the keys to open the door to a new story.